be so funky, cool, and sexy. Chef Tom Schaudel did, and he created a line of upscale restaurants and a catering facility designed around his unique perspective of fish, seafood, and wine. Hi, I'm Nancy Hornbeck reporting from Long Island. Ah, the CoolFish, Tom Schaudel's flagship restaurant in Syosset, New York. Join me as I tour this and the rest of the Tom Schaudel culinary dynasty.
I started in high school. I had ambled into a restaurant and took a dishwasher's job because the rock star thing wasn't working out for me so well. Having enough intelligence to know that you need a plan B if you're going to be a musician, I decided to go to chef school after high school just to have something to fall back on in case it didn't work out, and it didn't, and I did, you know. Cooking is really what I've done my whole life, and then turned two bad habits into a career. Well, CoolFish is probably the flagship store. It's, you know, dedicated primarily to fish. I mean, we did have to have a chicken and a pork, you know, for the masses, but it's, it was driven by, you know, my childhood love of fishing and the respect for the product. And I think it's a much more interesting, you know, food form than meat or poultry. Passion fish is an offshoot of that. It's a little quieter, a little more sedate. Then CoolFish is a little bigger and more bustling. And Tom, which is steak and sushi, and we thought that we could maybe combine, you know, two food groups to get all the Atkins people under one roof, you know. And so we decided to put those two together. We hadn't thought it been done before in Long Island, so we thought that'd be an interesting way to go. The Woodlands Catering is primarily dedicated to sort of an upscale catering crowd. We had looked around and saw a lot of places that have, you know, rubber chickens and you know, halibut that was cooked on Thursday. So we decided to see if we could take what we do a la carte and kind of apply it to a catering situation. And then C in the city is pretty much like CoolFish. It's dedicated primarily to fish, and it seats about the same amount of people. So it's a parallel restaurant.
What inspires you with each endeavor?
A combination of what's going on in the industry, my unhinged ravings about food, and, you know, what I think in my own mind. And it's probably a synergy of those three things, I would think.
Why did you choose Long Island to put so many restaurants?
I grew up here, you know, and when you leave here, and I've been away, but when you come back, there's things about Long Island that are precious, and I don't think you can find anyplace else. You know, I have a home on the East End, and I'm out there all the time, and you know, for 6, 7, 8 months of the year, there's no better place to be. And from a chef standpoint, you have wineries, you have growers, you have farms, you have fish, you have duck, you have all the industries here that make it kind of like a chef's sort of warehouse thing. So it's a very cool place to work and play.
How and why did you develop such a wonderful relationship to fish?
There's just something about being around the water, you know. If you get that sand in your shoes thing and you get stuck by the water, and then it just becomes an integral part of your life. I took that combined with the fact that I think it's much more interesting. I mean, if you have beef, you have maybe 4 or 5 cuts. With fish, the possibilities are endless. Flavor combinations are endless. So it's an unending palette of, you know, flavors, textures, colors. So for me, as an artist, I see that in a whole different light. And you know, beef is brown. You know, filet's brown, steak's brown. It's brown. You know, fish, you have snapper, yellowtail, red, blue, green, orange. So it's a colorful palette, and the myriad of tastes from oily to saline to sweet, it's a fabulous array of things to play with.
What is your philosophy about food?
I think purity of product is key. I think if you start with great ingredients, you'll ultimately, even if you beat them up a little, you'll wind up with a pretty good dish. So what we try and do is we try and start with the best possible products we can find. We try not to get in the way of the flavors too much. We do like to, you know, experiment sometimes, but I think sometimes chefs can get carried away in their zeal to be creative and great. What we try and do is we try and take a great product, treat it respectfully, add a little flavor, a twist of our own, and hopefully the people respond.
What is the other half of the meal?
That's the wine half. I think a lot of chefs haven't paid as much attention to wine as they should. I mean, I go to a lot of restaurants, and there's a lot of restaurants that have really good food, and then you get to the wine list, and it was, you know, put together by a salesman or, you know, printed for free. And I think that it's really the other half of the dining experience. If you looked at any of the great restaurants of France or the great restaurants in New York or Italy, they're all very wine conscious. And I think that's part of the industry that a lot of us haven't paid enough attention to.
Where and how did you get the understanding of this combination?
You have to drink it to think it. Noting the fact that, I thought it was important to learn. I took some classes early on, started collecting, and, we have access to a tremendous amount of wine. I mean, there's trade tastings twice a year, so I probably taste 2,000 wines a year. So it's just a question of building a library in your head. And the interesting part is it changes every year because weather conditions and winemakers shift around. So every year you have a whole new crop of things to play with and taste. It's great.
Do all your menus look like the one behind you?
The rest of the menu is illegible. That one's illegible. But that is a compilation of my menu done by an artist named Alex Echo. And he does different prints and fonts painted over each other hundreds and hundreds of times until it becomes a piece of artwork. And that happens to be my dinner menu behind me.
Let's talk about your label.
Well, I have two labels, actually. I have one, a Riesling that I made specifically for here. And Riesling is one of my favorite grapes. So I wanted to make a steely dry, bone-dry Riesling that would go with fish. So we did that, and we labeled it under the CoolFish label. So I have CoolFish Riesling. The other label is, I decided I want to make a little more serious wine, a more upscale version of some of the stuff that I see around. So in concert with Charles Massoud from Palmanock Vineyards, who's a friend, I have my own label through BATF, which is Tom Chaudel Reserve Selections. And I make a Reserve Cabernet, a Reserve Merlot, and a Reserve Chardonnay every year under that label.
Who is your typical clientele?
I think it's pretty much neighborhood people. I think you probably have the concentrated clientele is probably within a 5 or 6 mile radius. And then as it goes to 10 miles, it fades a little. So I would say it's pretty much Nassau County, Long Island, North Shore. We do have some people coming up from the South Shore. I mean, I give directions from the city and from Suffolk, but I think it's concentrated basically right around the restaurant.
Tell me about your Zaggett's review.
The last Zagat reviews that came out were, we got great reviews. We were actually the #1 independent restaurant on Long Island. The interesting thing about Zagat's, as opposed to reviews, is it's what people really think. It's not like, we're reviewed by critics and that's fine and that's their job. But I think Zagat's is a compendium of normal people that come in that aren't food critic jaded or so experienced that they can't be blown away by something. So it's really kind of a honest opinion of what your neighborhood thinks of you, and it's a great compliment to be chosen #3.
You have an extraordinary appreciation and attitude about your clientele. How did you develop that?
Years ago, I read an article that James Beard had written, and they asked him what his favorite restaurant was, and he said, "The one where everyone knows me." And here's a guy who had eaten all over the world. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build almost like a private club that, anybody can come in and feel a part of and feel welcome and feel like they're, family.
What makes your restaurant so unique and special?
That we do treat fish in a way that, a lot of other people don't. I mean, there are wonderful fish restaurants. I'm not saying that, we're alone in that. But I think that's the focus here.
Tell me about your staff.
Oh, they're great. I have the best restaurant staff in the United States, if not the universe. They're great people, and we've been able to hold people for a long period of time, and I think that's the key.
Describe 3 of your favorite creations.
There's a couple. There's one that I did for the James Beard House when I did a dinner there years ago, and we did a barbecued lobster. It was actually a Long Island dinner. I was in a restaurant on the East End, and I was trying to use foodstuffs that were representative of Long Island this summer. So we did a barbecued lobster on sort of a corn and cilantro saute with mashed local potatoes and a basil oil. And all of those flavors are all East End flavors. In the summer, you had lobster, you had corn, you had basil, and the potatoes, which are indigenous, obviously, to the East End. So that's one of them. I think the Chilean sea bass that we do here with the lobster fricassee and the smoked tomato relish, again, was a reflection of, taking a fish and giving it a Long Island spin. Because, my eye is always on Long Island when I'm cooking because it's, such a wonderful place to be and the ingredients are great in the summer. And so we took, Chilean sea bass, which is a very popular fish. I mean, we made like a sort of a lobster sauce with that and then used the tomatoes from the East End and smoked those. And then I think, just a simple dessert that we do, an upside-down apple tart, which is a kind of a takeoff on a tarte tatin, which is a classic French bistro dish. And it's very simple, Granny Smith apples, some caramel, and, serve that with an ice cream, and it's, it doesn't get much better than that, And it's simple enough to be, enjoyed by, kids and grown-ups alike. So I think those are the three that really stand out in my head.
Do you do any special events?
Yeah, we do a lot of them. We do a lot of fundraisers every year. I have my own pet fundraiser, and then I participate in probably maybe 15 or 20 others. The one that's my own is the Child Life Rainbow program at North Shore University Hospital. And we do every May, it's usually the first or second Thursday in May, we do a big fundraiser for the kids. It's sick children, and what they do is they provide services for sick and dying children, counseling, hospice, health care, the whole thing. So.
Do all of your restaurants have a wine cellar?
Each restaurant has its own cellar, and some more extensive than others, but we're serious about the wine program in every restaurant. And the wines are specifically selected to kind of enhance the foods that go with the restaurant. Like CoolFish probably has 500 wines on the list. That's the most ambitious of the restaurant group. But the rest of them have a very wide and very well thought out selection of wines. We just don't slam the list with, Mondavis and things that you see all over the place. I mean, I source out a lot of small producers and a lot of interesting wines from all over the world, actually.
What's next?
My father told me to try and break 100, and I didn't realize he was talking about golf. So, I don't know, I got, 85 restaurants to go.
Rock's music's loss is the food world's gain. Tom Shadell's flair and artistry in the kitchen and his impeccable skill for selecting fine wines helped create the colorful array of menu items at his specialty restaurants. So do yourself a favor and treat yourself to a dining experience that really rocks. I'm Nancy Hormick reporting for Close Up on America's Business.